The original RollerCoaster Tycoon released back in 1999 with its sequel following in 2002. RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic first released on mobile devices in 2016 and was a merging of the two games brought together. 2017 saw a release on Windows, and late last year it received a port to the Nintendo Switch. Will this game be your ride to happiness, or conversely, will it be your nemesis? Well, thank you to the publishing team for the review code, and now let's find out. So as I mentioned in the intro there, RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic takes the features of RollerCoaster Tycoon and its sequel RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 and brings them together in one package. The basic objective is the same across all content in this package, that being that you need to build a theme park and run it successfully, micromanaging a number of different points such as hiring staff, looking at the fees that you'll charge for each ride, building the rides themselves of course, looking at park layout, and meeting a specific objective for each of the parks that you manage to be able to move on to the next. There's a lot of content here to try that includes nearly 100 park scenarios, being those included in those two games. But on top of this, there are also some real world parks included that you can manage, albeit I do believe some of these may have been left out for licensing reasons, I would imagine. I never played these games back in the day, I was more of a theme park fan, so it wasn't as obvious to me exactly what may be missing as it will be to other people. You also have the expansion packs that were released back in the day included in this package, being Wacky Worlds and Time Twister, and the toolkit is also included in here. Now, a big part of the RollerCoaster Tycoon experience is of course building those roller coasters, and here there are a number that you'll unlock through researching as you develop your parks, and you can lay set tracks, or you can of course custom build your own as long as they fit within the parameters of the space you have. You can of course do this in-game within the parks that you are building, or you can use the mode that is specific to just building roller coasters if you want to do this without the stress of managing everything else. Now, I will say that the gameplay holds up incredibly well. It's a formula as old as time by this point, but that classic isometric view with the time-based unlocks of new rides via research and guests that will turn on a sixpence in terms of how happy they are, trying to balance everything together, it's very compelling, and the core gameplay here is still top-notch. There are a couple of minor grievances that I have. I will say that the objectives for each park are quite similar. It's always based around either getting your park to a particular rating, having a certain amount of guests visiting, or sometimes mixing it up with things like having to repay a loan or make a certain amount of money. But they are all very similar, and you do have to complete some of these before unlocking some of the other scenarios, which does feel a bit dated these days. What doesn't fare quite so well, unfortunately, are the controls. Now, obviously, initially these games were made for a keyboard and mouse, and whilst I do appreciate that, there have been plenty of other PC ports that have come to the Switch and managed to revise their control scheme to fit a console better. Let's look at the controls specifically then, and I'll tell you what I mean. First impressions were that they were cumbersome but manageable. You have menu icons at the top left and bottom left of your screen, and you can press Y or X to immediately click to these icons, meaning you don't have to navigate the cursor all the way there with the left stick, something you will be doing the vast majority of the time elsewhere. And pressing these icons will bring up further boxes that allow you to really start to micromanage. It may be hiring staff, looking at the rides and their performance, or with the bottom icons it'll be more about building. That could be rides, or it could be refreshment stalls, or even pathways. This all works okay. It's not ideal. I would have liked to have seen a radial wheel included for this console version, but it's fine as it is. It's your initial impressions when you try to do things such as rotate the camera or speed up the game. Or terraform the land is another one actually. Everything feels really outdated. For example, you have arrows in the top right hand corner of the screen that you can press to rotate the camera, meaning that you're constantly having to move the cursor across midway through a job, laying path for example, to rotate. Now, further inspection finds the control scheme in the pause menu, and if you give this a look you will see that most of these actions do have a shortcut, albeit most of the time they do involve holding down ZL and then pressing another button or using the stick for example. So after a while, once you learn these shortcuts, it will speed things up, but there's so many ways they could have made this so much more intuitive. You could have had buttons on the screen attached to the two menus that I mentioned earlier for things such as speeding the game up. The D-pad isn't used a whole lot unless it's in conjunction with something like the ZL button. This could have been used for game speed or rotating the camera. It does make the first couple of hours of your playthrough feel so much more tedious than a game about roller coasters should. Then there is the quite baffling choice to not include touchscreen controls. Now bearing in mind that initially this classic edition was made for mobile devices, and this decision makes even less sense. It's difficult because the gameplay does hold up well, for the most part at least, but the controls do mar the experience. They're not terrible, they're just okay. And they will make the first hour or so of playing, if you haven't played it before, possibly even if you have played it before on a PC, far more cumbersome than they had to be. Gameplay is still great. It holds up well, and you will find yourself compelled to keep going and improving each part that you build. It gets 18 out of 20. Controls are the weakest aspect of the game and really didn't need to be. Some of it is tied into the age of the games, but some of it is just not putting the full effort into making this a console version of what were once PC games. They get 12 out of 20. Moving on to visuals and audio then, and as I mentioned, these games use that classic isometric viewpoint. Now I love this view in simulation management games. I think it works very well still to this day, and the pixel art also looks very charming. Yes, it is quite basic, and when you first begin a park you'll be overwhelmed by the huge amount of green or white or tan, whichever backdrop you're building on, but once you start to build that park up, it really does look quite lovely. The fact that you can zoom in and really appreciate your park fully, seeing the little details such as the workman fixing a ride, that sort of thing, still does have you sitting back at times and just admiring the view. Even though it looks outdated, doing this still feels like a nice distraction. The issue is more down to the fact that there are some performance issues when you zoom out. So holding down ZL and then moving the stick will allow you to zoom in or out, and when you've zoomed out fully you will start to notice the park really chugging. It's unfortunate that this happens. This is the part of the game that I didn't expect to have any issues with. For the most part I didn't play that zoomed out, so it wasn't ever an issue, but again, surely this is something that should have been corrected. Audio wise, it's exactly as I would have expected. As I said, I didn't play this back in the day, but I played a whole bunch of theme park, and it has that jovial feel to it. It feels almost more like circus music than theme park music, but it gets the point across. You're in a land of wonder, somewhere fun, and it certainly conveys this and complements the game as you play along. There are some times though where there's no music at all. Now at first I thought this was whenever I was putting something down, building a new track or a new ride for example. But it didn't seem to be this. It just seemed to be that some of the scenarios or levels just didn't have any music, or it didn't follow through at least, which was a bit strange. Visuals certainly have that retro charm, and I do think they hold up quite well. Not necessarily as you look at them, if that makes sense, but being more than the sum of their parts. It's a style that's perfect for this type of game. It's just those performance issues that drag it down. They get 14 out of 20. Audio, without ever being spectacular, does what it needs to do really, and subtly complements the game in the background. It also gets 14 out of 20. RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic costs £22.49 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. For this price you are getting a host of scenarios. As I mentioned, I believe there are nearly 100, but that doesn't include the expansion packs or the real life theme parks. It's a shame that some of these look to have been removed, especially as one of the ones removed was Alton Towers in the UK where I live. But it's understandable, and there's still a massive amount of content here. That's before I even talk about the fact, of course, that you can build your own roller coasters either in your parks or as a separate entity, and this is a huge amount of fun. I can imagine some people spending hours upon hours just in this part of the game without really ever attending to any sort of park, just building rides for fun. Really, it's just those controls that bring the score down slightly here, otherwise it would have been the perfect package in terms of price. It gets 19 out of 20. To conclude, RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic is a game that is just as addictive to play now as I assume it would have been back then. Like I said, I didn't play the two games back in the day, but I did play their competition, if you like, Theme Park, and I lost countless hours to that game. And finally being able to test just how green the grass would have been on the other side of the fence, I can say it's pretty lush. The controls do let things down, and the thing is that even if they hadn't fixed some of the issues that I mentioned, just having touchscreen controls would have alleviated a lot of this, even if you still would have had the problem whilst playing on the big screen. As it happens, you almost get the worst of both worlds, and that will affect the score. Make no mistake though, the core gameplay is still fantastic, and it's nice to have these classic games on the Nintendo Switch. RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic gets a SwitchUp score of 77%. Thank you everybody for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. If you're looking for a retro review of a different sort, my other channel, GB Bricks, has just released a review of a classic Lego set from 1988, being the Blacktron Message Intercept base. I'll put a card in the top right hand corner if you'd like to give that a watch. Seems quite apt with us talking about building roller coasters in this review here. Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick this game up, you can use our website switchup.gg, and doing so will get you 5% of your purchase price back as cashback. There are also links down there to places such as PlayAsia. There's a link down there to Nixie if you're looking for Joy-Con. Using the links and the codes stated will get you 5% off of your order. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.